we have a great history, okay, of doing things the way they must be done. Now, that is sometimes slow, it is sometimes vexatious, sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's so painful that, oh, this is obviously the logical thing to do, so we should just do it, and you should just blunder through it with brute force. No, you shouldn't. Because when you're building something, let alone building on the foundations of a great country, you better be damn sure that every brick is being carefully placed, because it should be there for a long period of time. But sometimes you do an inspection of your building and you find some faulty construction, something of a dubious nature. What do you then do with it? And it's exactly that metaphorical corollary that we are addressing here. Abrogation of Article 370, Special Status of Jammu and Kashmir, one of the most vexatious thing in this country for the better part of 80 years, ensuring that not only that Jammu and Kashmir remained an international dispute, that it forever remained a domestic dispute. That for 80 years, we ourselves couldn't figure out what Jammu and Kashmir is, where it is, what it stands for, where it comes in the Indian Constitution, what it enjoys, what it does not enjoy, and it became such a vexatious thing that forget the development of the state, forget demanding POK back, we were just consumed figuring this out. Now, have we figured it out? I don't know. We'll get the added wisdom of the Supreme Court on this matter tomorrow, and there are a lot of parallel things that are going on. I mean, what's the difference between what a court decides and what Parliament decides? What's the difference between presidential order and parliamentary assent? What's the difference between a resolution and a voting majority? What is the difference between a reorganizational bill and a constitutional amendment? A lot of the subtleties will get decided in the context of J&K. I'm assuming a lot of these subtleties were considered in the run-up to August 2019 and well considered. So let me raise the larger premise where we began. It's been 80 years. We've lost context. The Indian independence came slowly, then fast. World War II ended in 45. Up until World War II, you had Winston Churchill, who was saying in writing that India will be liberated over my dead body. And he was the victor, the British hero. But the British people voted him out of power a few months later. And the new British government, under the threat of losing absolute control of mutiny in India, not only wanted to get out, but actually wanted to get out fast, really fast. Didn't even wait for a constitutional setup, let's go. And they got out really fast. So 47 was chaotic. While getting out, they had a slash and burn policy. Mountbatten, who was commander-in-chief of all British forces in Southeast Asia, a British force that had just won the Second World War, just defeated the Japanese in the Indo-Pacific. They could not police the partition of the country which they themselves created by the Hindu-Muslim divide. So millions died. Millions died in 43 of a famine. 3 years later, millions died during partition. There was a mutiny going on by a trumped-up Nizam of Hyderabad. There were aspirations going on in Jugaad. The other European countries still felt that they could hang on to their protectorates and colonies here. There were many things that required dealing with, and we messed up this one. So let's now move on. Or do we commit ourselves to forever be figuring it out? It's a worthwhile question. Certain legal and technical parts of the matter are before the court. You had the wonderful example of a court ruling that has allowed India to move on from an equally vexatious problem in Ayodhya. We are moving on. Okay, to the benefit of India's Muslims and to the benefit of India's Hindus, we are moving on. The property dispute is over. The brothers can be friends again because they're no longer fighting over a few acres of land. Okay, so we can move on. So let's open up this conversation. General Dwivedi is with me, Kuldeep Khoda joining us, Utpal Khol is with us, and Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, we're consumed, sir. I mean, I'm sure you spent the better part of your entire life that, you know, in 52 they came up with this, then Delhi Agreement, then there was a presidential order in 54, then this was a special insurgent in a transitory principle, then Sheikh Abdullah did this and then Nehru mucked up that. When do we move on?
Rishabh, the fact of the matter is that any secular individual will welcome the abrogation of any article that basically makes a particular state different from other states. Now, there's so many princely states acceded to India, and everybody acceded on the same format. And from the day one, unfortunately, the government of India treated Kashmir as somehow different from every other princely state that had acceded to India. Now, this was based, the fact is that this entire thing was based on this absurd two-nation theory, that Hindus and Muslims are two separate nations. General Dwivedi will tell you that, in the army, for example, there's no such nonsensical talk about, about Hindus and Muslims being different. In the army, they are one. Hindus and Muslims are one. Christians are one. The entire army is a collective, as is the country. So I would like to say, Rishabh, if you're a secular person, you will welcome this. And the second point is, all this differentiation was made to, quote unquote, ensure normalcy in Kashmir. Did we see normalcy in Kashmir? I used to go there quite a lot in the 1990s, when actually what took place was nothing less than ethnic cleansing of an entire community. A community that was peace-loving, a community that never threatened anybody, that never, committed any kind of murder or anything on the basis of communal. In fact, that sought to live in very close harmony with other communities in Kashmir. And there was an ethnic cleansing that took place, which frankly, it's a shameful thing that the human rights warriors across the world till today have not yet acknowledged the degree of ethnic cleansing that went on. So I'd like to say very clearly that Kashmir can be a real paradise on earth. It can be a knowledge hub. It can attract investment from around the world. It's got a beautiful climate. It is a very talented people, including Kashmiri Pandits, may I add, who are among the most talented people that you can find anywhere in the world, wherever they settle down. And the way to do it is to stop this nonsense of saying, oh, this is a different kind of state, because it is a different majority. The fact is, Hindus and Muslims are one, Rishabh, and if you believe that, you will believe that this was absolutely the right thing to do.
So the reason, ladies and gentlemen, that anytime a constitutional bench of the Supreme Court sits, okay, it adds collective wisdom, okay, into refining some things that are so complex that they never have exact objective answers. Where is the line between the judiciary and the legislature? There's no objective answer. Where is the difference and the interpretation of the basic structure of the Constitution, which has been enshrined as a concept by precedent in India, which is open for conversation? As I said, conversation is always a good thing, but it is something that is in conversant practice in the jurisprudence of this country. So you get added wisdom on all these things. You get a lot of nuance and a subtlety, a few points answered, maybe a few points raised. But within all of this, there is the larger question that in the model of the Jugaad that was done, and General Dwivedi, there's no running away from it. What we did in 1952, which is known infamously as the Delhi Agreement, was Jugaad. And that Jugaad was slapped on to give it some kind of constitutional propriety by basically saying, I'll give you an example, ladies and gentlemen, okay? So the Maharaja is deciding who is a resident of Kashmir, okay, because that's very important to him, because the definition of whether it is Muslim majority or Hindu majority on which partition is being done is being decided on who lives there. No. So that's why it's important. Okay. So he's deciding who's a resident of Kashmir. So then they say, okay, if you've been living here before 1910 and own property for at least 10 years before 1910, you are a resident. Okay. If you have moved out, you remain a resident because you might have gone for a holiday. What happens then? But you are a resident, your children can be residents, your grandchildren can also be residents, but their children cannot be. Okay. So if you own land in Kashmir, all right, and you had shifted to Delhi, and 3 generations were born there, you by default gave up your land in Kashmir. Okay. When the basic structure of India's constitution gives you a fundamental right to live and reside anywhere, so a special category will be created in the constitution. So General Dwivedi, from a non-legal perspective, yes, it's a bit Jugaadu, but my question is different. We've been talking about 52, 58, 54, 48, this UN, that UN. When do we move on, sir?
Well, Rishabh, first and foremost, a person like me, who has been deployed in Kashmir since every decade since 1970, I have seen how the Kashmir has evolved, how the valley has evolved. And I can give you a very personal perspective. First and foremost, what all happened after independence in 1952, and it get complicated because the thing was that no one understood the complexity of the issue. And when a child is delivered, India was just born. It was very difficult to comprehend because there are so many complex issues were there. So some of the issues you rightly said were quick fix solution. Means you just for the time being overcome that issue without actually applying holistically what will be the repercussion time to come. And the first time I went to Kashmir to do a course in early 1970s, I found that some kind of peace was prevailing and this Jugaad was somehow working, though not to the best of the system. But then things changed when I was deployed in the early 90s and the later in 2000. I think the whole narrative had changed. It was the militants who are calling the shot. The complete valley had been subjected to terrorism, and it was a no-go situation because 2 things had to be actually demolished. One was the nexus between the politicians and the terrorists and ISI hand on both these, and secondly was that governance had to be put in place. The security forces were not able to work. So point I'm coming to is there had to be a time when this whole narrative had to be changed. And that narrative change took place on 5th August 2019. I think this step was a game changer for the betterment of the people of JNK.
No, but no, there will be people who will disagree with that opinion, sir,
Yes.
and you know it. But so my question is, there will be people you agree with and people you disagree with. But at some point of time, you have to make a judgment call as adults to say, okay, we are closing this chapter because we have to move on and we have to look to the future. The future is the development of the state. What does the state require in terms of its state GDP, in terms of infrastructure growth, progress, vikas, and the future has to be now to examine POK. If हम ही लगे हुए हैं कि भी वो 35A की पॉइंट B में 1952 में शेख अब्दुल्ला ने प्रोविजन डलवाया था, हम ही फिगर आउट नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, 80 साल हो गए, तो what POK will you go and get?
Rishabh, the point is people who disagree must go and see things on the ground and not just talk from the virtual mode. And I was in the valley last month on October 30th till for about 3 days. The sea change that you can see, I don't think anyone would disagree. The kind of development that is taking place, the kind of normalcy that is there.
Hopefully.
I think point number 1, that people must be asked to go and visit there. Secondly, people told me there that there's a vibes coming from POK and they say that we want to join India because they are now seeing the kind of progress. So
Okay.
I would only say the one is that such people who disagree must be shown the ground situation and not disagree.
So I've said it that you have to very carefully build this structure. Our generation, okay. Your grandfathers and great-grandfathers laid the foundation, then you build the ground floor and first floor. So in my generation, okay, we want to place every brick carefully. Even while we look at the structural faults and Jugaad solutions and maybe the not the best Saria and cement used at some point of time in the past, but we are all cognizant that we are just a transient step in history. There will be people after us as they were before us. And they will judge us just like we today sit and judge Nehru. Okay? And I'm telling you, I'm giving the caveats. Think of India at that point of time. 6 million have just died in Bengal. You can't feed yourselves. The British have just cancelled all the war loans they've taken from you. You are what, 3% of the world's GDP, where you once used to be 25%. They've robbed everything else. Millions are dying in partition. Hyderabad is in revolt. Okay, the French have different plans with Puducherry. There are lots of crises. So we can be forgiving, even if we can be judgmental, but we are being judged today. Future generations will judge us today as well. What did we do? Did we build on those strong foundations? Or did we just fiddle around for another 80 years? So let me get Utpal Kaul into this. Utpal Kaul, what is the lesson we have learned from Ayodhya, where you had centuries of a dispute, decades of court cases, which have culminated, and on January of 2024, we as a country with Hindus and Muslims to benefit equally, move on, because one sore point has disappeared.
Rishabh, thank you very much for inviting me for this debate. You have put me the technical question on Ayodhya. Let me tell you as a student of history that it's a battle for Hindus for 500 years. And it was the Sikh Nihangs who fought last big battle for Ram Janmabhoomi in Ayodhya. And I may tell you, thousands of Hindus have sacrificed for all these 500 years. But the foreigners, let me use the word foreigners, came to India and they tried to demolish our symbolic and great pilgrimage centers like Ayodhya, Mathura, and no temple was allowed to build in 700 years. The biggest temple built in Delhi was by Birla Temple. It was Birla Temple. Can you tell me any big temple in 900 years in Delhi? No.
Yeah, but Utpalji, that's my question, right? So now, if somebody 500 years ago came and sacked Mathura, okay, now his descendants now are not to blame for it, just like the descendants of the Nazis are not to be blamed for the Jewish Holocaust. But it is in the benefit of Germany today that they outlaw Holocaust denial, that they mark out Auschwitz. It is the benefit of Germans as much as it is in the benefit of the Jews that there is truth and reconciliation and acknowledgement. यहाँ तो हम acknowledgement ही नहीं कर पाते हैं कि ऐसा कुछ हुआ. So we are still trapped, which is why my question was that Ayodhya and the ruling, the judgment that came out over the property dispute, has it allowed for a healing touch and the country to move on? एक तो issue हमने खत्म करा.
Rishabhji, I may tell you that now I will give you the what the court has given the wise judgment on Ayodhya, and I am sure, I am totally confident of our Supreme Court and the wisdom of our honorable judges. And today, tomorrow, whole nation will celebrate when the big judgment will come on Article 370 and 35A. It will be a great judgment because I understand that it is the legal, what was done, it was something extra. If you read what is the conversation between Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah and Ambedkar ji, when Sheikh Abdullah went to him and asked him that India should only control defense, foreign policy, communication and currency. And Ambedkar ji said, but what you are going to give, you want only security and you want only money. I don't have this. You just go to Nehru ji, he will give you whatever you want. So it was, Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah was very smart guy. He was playing something in Srinagar, something in Jammu, and then diverting attention of Jawaharlal Nehru and Congress. So I may tell you that it was late in 53 that even Jawaharlal Nehru understood the game of what we call a Kashmir conspiracy case. He understood the game of Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah and put him in prison for 10 years. So I think now India must stand as a nation, and it is not banana republic. It is a republic.
Yeah, I don't want to get into sobriquets. It was a very honest and simple question. So let me try to put it to Mr. Kuldeep Hoda, who spent time in uniform in Kashmir for a long period of time. Kuldeep ji, kabhi divorce mein, property dispute, we keep going on and on and on and on. Jhagde chalte rehte hain, they never finish. They go on for decades. Property ban jati hai, खंडर जिंदगी खत्म हो जाती है, लेकिन dispute खत्म नहीं होता. At what point of time have we learnt a lesson from Ayodhya that we are capable as a modern country to actually peaceably resolve old and long-standing disputes and move on to the priorities and agendas of a modern civilization?
Absolutely, Rishabhji, you're dot on the point. I was born in Srinagar. I have grown up in Kashmir. I studied there except for a few years outside J&K. I was allotted J&K cadre, and I have remained all through 30 years or 8 years of service in J&K only. So to me, right from childhood, it appeared to be a very perennial problem, which was never-ending problem, and everybody had taken for granted that we are going to live in this turmoil and it's never going to end. And the move of abrogation in 2019 gave a feeling that yes, some closure is happening to this problem, which has put the state in turmoil throughout the 70 years. And now, of course, it is in the court, and let's hope that the court will appreciate the issue legally as well as from realistic point of view. It has put J&K back on the track, and the development is happening on an unprecedented scale now. The peace is prevailing. The terrorism is down, almost has been totally wiped out. The law and order problem, which was a perennial issue again, is nowhere to be seen. Before 1990 also, let me say it with a lot of authority that peace was never there. Law and order problem has always been an issue right from 1947, 1948. And especially after 1953, when Sheikh Abdullah was arrested, every week we would see some serious incidents happening on law and order front. And I have seen it in my service also throughout, from 1974 to 1990 also, when there was no terrorism. It was an almost everyday problem to deal with the crowds, pelting crowds, people getting hurt, policemen getting hurt, and we had come to live with it, that we are born to face this all through. Now a sigh of relief has been granted by the move of the government, and uncertainty in any case, anywhere, always keeps the minds anxious and vulnerable to all sorts of interventions from outside. And that is what Pakistan took advantage of when they started the terrorism in 1989. And before that also, now and then you would hear that some foreign power is coming forward to act as a mediator between India and Pakistan.
Okay, so Kuldeep ji, in a reality check, like I said, there is legal and constitutional matters here, okay, which we will get enhanced wisdom on tomorrow, because those are also perennial issues. What is the balance between this? What is the difference between this and that? But my question then, in a very simplistic sense for people, ordinary people like us, is, in a problem that was created, which for generations could not be solved, we are now 80 years, it took us to do something different. Do we have to draw the assumption that some problems we just have to accept and they should be there forever, and no effort should be made to try and resolve them because they are what they are? I mean, if you look at Jerusalem, 1000 years they've been at it, हमें तो सिर्फ 100 साल हुए हैं, we can be at it for another 900 years. Kuldeep ji.
Yes, exactly. Let's hope the thing is doesn't get reversed in any manner, because that will again put the sword of uncertainty over the heads of all people of J&K, and it will mean going in the reverse gear again, and it's for everybody except from some individual or group interests. Nobody else is interested in.
Okay. So that's going to be my next question. Now, that's going to be my next question, because we were told by certain politicians that if you do this, Kashmir will burn, Jammu will burn, Delhi will burn, everything will get destroyed. We were told the same thing, that Ayodhya will burn, Lucknow will burn, Delhi will burn. Professor Nalapat, what have the people of the country, okay, both in Ayodhya and in Kashmir, what lessons, brutal lessons have they taught our governors and our politicians in just the past few years?
That the people of the country can be trusted. And Rishabh, this problem was imported. In the 1980s, it was allowed to have many, the tens of thousands of people crossed over. They claimed to be from Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Heaven knows where they were from. And they resettled in the valley. And it was this group of people who had resettled from the 70s, the 1980s, that basically a large part of the trouble came from them. And so the problem was, in a sense, imported. And if I used to go to Kashmir. Probably Kuldeep ji was there at that point in time. In some houses, I saw photographs of Bill Clinton. And I said, why is the American, president's photograph here? Oh, he is the one who is going to make sure Kashmir goes to Pakistan. And yes, Clinton did work very hard to try that. But fortunately, he didn't succeed. So the point is, Rishabh, we have spent so much of money in Kashmir. Per capita is a huge amount. You can't buy loyalty. You can win loyalty by showing trust. And my point is, removal of Article 370 was an expression of trust in the Kashmiri people, that they are part of India and they'll be proud to be part of India. And may I end by saying, look what is happening on the other side. Look at the collapse of Pakistan. And this is what happens when you base a state on the specious ground that, religion divides. The fact is, religious teaching should unite and not divide. And that is the lesson of Pakistan and its collapse. And that, I think, what is happening in Kashmir, as Kuldeep ji said, the kind of, peaceful atmosphere, it's a tribute to the people of Kashmir, if I may say so.
We lose context, and context is important. General Dwivedi, now today you and I sit, okay, and you have far more years of wisdom and experience than I do, but we can sit down and we can say, look, if Karyappa had been allowed, if Thamaiya had been allowed, okay, then we say, look, if Indira had done this differently in the Shimla agreement, what is this LOC nonsense? We should have solved the problem. We had these many thousands of POWs, you had surrounded Lahore, just had an unconditional peace, a surrender in Dhaka. But the question is, I just want people to think this watching the broadcast, okay? You have to understand that Pakistan has just been divided from one country into two. You've had a major, stunning, perhaps unbelievable victory within 14 days. You've liberated Bangladesh. It's a strategic win, it's a win for freedom, it's everything in the book. So you are thinking you've done a great job. And then you think, chalo, itna kar liya, isko we'll do it later. And sometimes the later doesn't come. Okay? And here we are 40, 50 years later. Then we look back at historical missed opportunities and we get consumed by it. Kash मैं Google की stock खरीद लेता सर 20 साल पहले. ठीक है? नहीं खरीदी. So now that's done. So General Dwivedi, how do we now move on? Because we have to do the development of the state. We have to think of POK. अभी तो हम यहीं फंसे पड़े हैं कि क्या था नहीं क्या नहीं था.
Well, Nisha, first and foremost, hindsight is always 20/20. So therefore,
Exactly.
There's a lot of wisdom that comes, when you look back. But the point is, you cannot be enslaved to the history. Every generation has the onus to change the status quo. Because the moment you accept status quo, you are then becoming fait accompli. And that's not how the nations are built. And incidentally, you talked about Bangladesh war. I fought the war as second lieutenant. In fact, only on 8 December, we attacked Comela and got the battle on us. But the point is that having done what you have done, you have to exploit it, because you can't just sit on the laurels and you on the victory, because victory has to be and converted
Correct.
into intangible results. Now coming to the J&K per se, I only like to make two important points. First and foremost, we need to undo what was not done right, and that's where the leadership comes. And secondly, we have to look about the future. You cannot be stuck into the present or the past, and future is that we need to move forward. And that's how the nations are built. Because
Yes.
on status quo, you can never build a nation. And the second point is you talk about collective wisdom. Collective wisdom comes from all quarters of the nation intellectual. And that means everybody. And I'm sure when collective decisions are taken, they are far-reaching and they have great dividends.
Yes, because-
And in democratic country, the decision may come slow, but let me tell you, they're well calibrated.
Yes, and that's the point I've reiterated. So we are going to get a lot of nuance, a lot of educated adding of the collective wisdom of a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court, building upon what are extremely legally complex issues. The substance of it is a separate conversation. That's the conversation we are having. They have to figure out on constitutional amendment and presidential order and 370 and the powers of the Constituent Assembly when it dissolved itself, and who then gets those powers. Does it the State Assembly, which does not sit at the point because it too has been dissolved, does it then come to Parliament? They have to look at all these matters and then apply their minds to it. Okay, there's no thumb rule. They have to apply their minds to it. Okay, but the conversation we are having, I'll leave the last word with Utpal Kaul. Utpal Kaul, as you look around the world right now, okay, and you know what's happening in Jerusalem, they've been at it for 1,000 years, sir. In Belfast, in Northern Ireland, at it for 800 years. The human civilization, for some reason, has an immense capacity. कि लगे रहो, लगे रहो, लगे रहो, लगे रहो, लगे रहो, मारते रहो, काटते रहो, ठीक है? But we have equal examples, sir, South Africa and others, where you can do truth and reconciliation and move on and build a better society. What's the lesson on how to do it?
I think we have shown it many times. Atal Bihari Vajpayee said, I will go to Lahore in bus. Every time Modi ji has gone uninvited in a way to Lahore to attend the marriage of Nawaz Sharif's relation. So we are trying our best with Pakistan, and we are trying to give best our nation to each and every part of India, including Kashmir. And if you compare Kashmir with the Pak-occupied Kashmir, there's a hell of difference. The way the development is in Kashmir, universities, hospitals, tunnels, infrastructure,
Okay.
Roads, buildings, schools, colleges, and how the life has moved on, how the tourism has developed.
Okay, I want you to think, so I want you to think this is post-Second World War Germany. Adolf Hitler has just given an order to one of his chief lieutenants to burn the country to the ground. He disobeys that order, but the country is bombed into smithereens. It has just conducted the worst possible genocide. There are millions of Germans who have been participatory in that genocide. How do you rebuild? How does Germany become the 4th largest economy in the world after that? It's worth thinking. Destroyed, divided, with a heinous, blood-stained, genocidal history. How do you bear the guilt of what you've just done, or what your dad did, grandfather did? Okay? It is possible then, right? The premise is very simple. We can follow the logic of doing things and fighting about them forever. Or we can hope that we have the capacity for truth and reconciliation and moving on, so that the focus can be on the development, not on Hari Singh, oh my God, on Aurangzeb, on Ghaznavi had come, then Ghori had come, and 800 years later we still can't figure out कि भी वो शिवलिंग था या फाउंटेन थी, ठीक है, आप लगे हुए हो. Yes, they came, they destroyed the temples. Why should any Muslim feel bad about it? It wasn't him. The modern day Germans didn't run Auschwitz. Their ancestors did. The ancestors should be held to account, and they should be happy that their ancestors are being held to account. They should be happy an Auschwitz memorial is on, and Holocaust denial is a crime. So, truth and reconciliation happens this. I think Professor Narapan mentioned trust several times. We have to think things differently. So, the question I leave you with is, how and when do we move on? I thank my speakers.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.